Okay guys, welcome to my channel. Today we are making Ofada sauce and I'm starting with the meat. So if you look closely under the meat, you can see Ponmo. So I'm adding my seasoning and spices. This is onions, curry powder and thyme. I'm adding my ginger, blended ginger and garlic. I'm going to be adding salt and of course seasoning. This is not all the meat, this is all the meat, but this is not all the pomo I'm boiling. You can see that under the meat there is pomo. The pomo under is a thicker one. The thinner ones I've separated them and I'm going to be adding them later on in this video. So at this point, what I'm doing, I'm not going to be adding water at this point. I want the meat to boil in its own natural fluid first. It's more flavorful, it's more tasty doing that. So I'm incorporating the seasoning and spices into the meat right now. I'm incorporating the seasoning and spices into the meat to allow it to spread evenly in the meat. So I'll do that. Once I'm satisfied, I'll go on to cover and allow it to boil. So at this point, I'm fine with it. I will just leave the fluid to boil. So this recipe is for just 20 people. So at this point, you can see that the fluid is boiling. So I'm going to add extra water. And two reasons why I add extra water. First of all, is to have a lot of extra stock on ground for other meals I will make, and also the salt content I use is quite usually high at the beginning. So when I add water, it helps to reduce the concentration of salt that will enter into the meat. So at this point, the water I added has boiled and my meat is almost completely soft. So at this point, I'm adding the last set of pomo. And why I separate my pomo is because by the time it gets into the stew, if it is too soft already, to start to scatter in the stew, to start to scatter, and that would be a waste of money and it won't be nice. It won't just be nice. So I'm adding it last and it will just boil in the steam. To boil in the steam. I usually find out the thinner ones by touching. I observe, I touch the edges. So my meat is ready here and I've started bleaching my oil. I'm bleaching it covered because it's safer. After bleaching my oil, I'm going to be going in with other ingredients, starting with onions and locust beans. And this step, I was actually supposed to allow the oil to cool completely, but I didn't have the luxury of time for that. So I had to use the shortcut of covering it immediately. You can see my onions floating at this point, and since it is floating already, means I'm ready to add my pepper. Normally, Ofada sauce doesn't need tomatoes, but if you notice this pepper mix, you will see that there's tomatoes inside. Is because the client specified that she doesn't want it to be too spicy because most of people eating it are elderly people. So I had to reduce the spiciness with tomatoes, and I added my stock from the meat earlier here and also my salt. Normally I don't like to cook with salt. I don't like to cook stews and soups with salt. I prefer to stick to stock and seasoning. So after covering and it's boiling here, I came back to stir, and the plan is to leave it open and allow it to evaporate, the water to evaporate. So the water has evaporated and it is almost completely fried. So it is at this point I'll be going in with all my meat and the momo. And normally there's supposed to be eggs and fish and assorted meat in Ofada sauce, but this client specified that they are fine with just beef and pomo. So I've added it. This point is to allow the rest. There's still a bit of stock in the meat, and there's still, and also the pepper needs to enter the meat. The flavor of the meat needs to enter the pepper. They just need to come together. So that's what I'm doing here. And I notice I added it very at the very last end when the stew is almost cooked, because of course you don't want your meat or pomo to be too soft. So that is what I am doing here. So I've put all my pomo and my meat, and next thing to do is to cover and just allow everything steam together. You notice I reduced my heat also to bring out enough steam So I will leave it open at this point. It's ready, but I'll just leave it open for whatsoever fluid is left to evaporate a little before I dish. Thank you for watching. Kindly subscribe and like and share.